In the very beginning, before light and dark night, before mountains and seas, before name and form, there was only chaos, a void, a yawning abyss without boundaries, without distinction, where neither time nor order yet existed. From this intangible emptiness, there gradually emerged the first great substance, Gaia, the earth. She appeared as solid, warm matter, the mother and sovereign of all that supports and nourishes life. Gaia was not merely the ground beneath one's feet, but a living, thinking force, filled with fertility and power. After her arose Uranus, the sky, her natural counterpart and continuation, the vast, cold, starry dome of infinity that spread above the earth and seemed to embrace her from above. Their union was not merely the marriage of two beings, it was the meeting of two cosmic principles, the dense, fertile Mother Earth and the immense, overarching sky. From their union came the first generation of beings, the foundation of all myth, the ancestors of the Olympian gods. The first children of Gaia and Uranus were the Titans, mighty, ancient spirits, each embodying one aspect of the universe. Among them were Oceanus, who governed the waters, Hyperion, lord of light and the sunrise, Iapetus, forefather of the human race, and Cronus, the youngest and most cunning of the Titans. There were also Rhea, the motherly preserver, Themis, the personification of divine law, Mnemosyne, the spirit of memory, and others, 12 elder Titans in all, whose names and powers established the first order and archetypes of the world. But Gaia and Uranus also brought forth other, wilder and more primeval beings. Among them were the Cyclopes, mighty giants with a single eye in the middle of their foreheads. Their strength and craftsmanship were unmatched. Masters of fire and the forge, the Cyclopes would one day create the thunderbolts and other wondrous works of divine art. Even more fearsome were the Hecatonchires, the 100-handed or 50-headed giants, beings of unimaginable power. Each possessed not one, but 100 arms, and often many heads, the raw force of the earth itself, capable of sweeping away anything in its path. Yet not all in this first world was harmony. Uranus, the sky, became fearful of his own offspring, their strength, their strange forms, and the boundless might they represented. Terrified that they might challenge his authority, Uranus began to despise his children. To rid himself of them, he forced them back into their mother's depths, driving them down into the womb of Gaia, into the damp darkness of the earth, into Tartarus itself. This caused Gaia unspeakable agony. She, who had brought forth life, now felt her children trapped within her, suffering in darkness. Their cries echoed through her body like pain. Thus birth turned into torment, and the joy of creation became anguish and rage. Unable to endure her suffering, Gaia conceived a plan, not of words, but of action. For the first time, she devised a scheme of vengeance. From herself, she forged a sickle, sharp and gleaming, the symbol of fate and transformation. She offered this weapon to her children, urging them to strike down their tyrannical father. But fear held them back. None dared raise a hand against Uranus. Only the youngest, Cronus, bold and cunning, agreed to help his mother. When night fell and Uranus descended to lay upon the earth, Cronus lay in wait. As the sky embraced the earth, Cronus struck with the sickle, cutting away the source of Uranus's power. It was an act of both despair and liberation. Uranus was wounded and overthrown, stripped of his primordial strength, and retreated into the heavens. From his blood that fell upon Gaia, new beings were born, wonders and horrors alike. Where the blood touched the earth, the Uranies, furies arose. vengeful goddesses of retribution and oath, bringers of both justice and madness. From the same blood sprang the giants, fierce and mighty, destined to hurl mountains against the heavens. And from the drops that fell on the trees were born the Meliae, nymphs of the ash tree. From the fragments of Uranus's body cast into the sea, mingled with foam, there came into being Aphrodite, goddess of beauty and desire, rising pure and radiant from the ocean's foam, a paradoxical child of violence and creation. Thus, the world before Olympus was a realm of birth and strife, of love entwined with bloodshed, of creation bound to destruction. From chaos emerged Gaia and Uranus. From their union came the Titans, the Cyclopes, and the 100-handed giants, forces that embodied the elements and laws of nature. And within this primal, tragic cycle lay the first seeds of all that would unfold later in myth, the dawn of the divine order that would one day give rise to the gods of Olympus. After Cronus overthrew his father Uranus and seized power, he reigned among the Titans as the new king. But with the throne came a curse. Uranus had foretold that Cronus too would one day be cast down by his own son. Cronus lived in constant dread of this prophecy. He took his sister Rhea as his wife, and when their children were born, terror overcame him. Each time Rhea gave birth, Cronus swallowed the child, so that none would ever grow to threaten his rule. Thus he devoured 5 of his offspring, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. Rhea mourned and suffered deeply, but at first she could do nothing. When the time came for the birth of her 6th child, she could bear no more. Rhea turned to her mother, Gaia, for help. Gaia devised a plan to deceive Cronus. When the infant Zeus was born, Rhea secretly hid him in a cave on the island of Crete. In his place, she wrapped a stone in swaddling clothes and presented it to Cronus. Unknowing, Cronus swallowed the stone as he had swallowed the others. Meanwhile, Zeus was raised in hiding. The Gigantomachy nursed him with her milk. Bees brought him honey, and the Curetes, armored warriors, guarded the cave, clashing their weapons upon their shields to drown out the cries of the child. Thus, the years passed, and Zeus grew to manhood. When he had come of age, Zeus resolved to fulfill the prophecy and overthrow Cronus. With the aid of Metis, the goddess of wisdom and cunning, Zeus prepared a special potion. Cronus drank it, and at once he was seized with torment. He vomited forth all the children he had swallowed. One after another they emerged from his belly. First Hestia, then Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. They were alive and whole, as though no time had passed at all. Now, Zeus commanded a mighty host of brothers and sisters. Then began the great war between the new generation of gods and the elder Titans. For 10 years the struggle raged, shaking the whole cosmos. On one side stood Cronus and the Titans, on the other, Zeus and his divine siblings. Long the battle hung in balance, but Zeus released from the depths of Tartarus the monstrous beings once imprisoned by Uranus, the Cyclopes, and the 100-handed giants. In gratitude, the Cyclopes forged weapons of power for the gods. To Zeus, they gave the thunderbolt and lightning. To Poseidon, the trident. To Hades, a helm of invisibility. The 100-handed joined the war, hurling mountains and crags upon the Titans. Against such fury, the Titans could not endure. Victory belonged to Zeus and his allies. The Titans were cast down, bound in chains, and consigned to Tartarus, the deepest, darkest abyss of the underworld, guarded by the 100-handed giants. The world was cleansed of the old dominion, and a new age began. After the end of the Titanomachy, when Cronus and his allies were cast down into the dark abyss of Tartarus, it seemed that the world had at last found order. Zeus and his brothers divided the realms among themselves. He took dominion over the heavens, Poseidon over the sea, and Hades, over the underworld. The earth and all upon it belonged to them collectively. Mount Olympus became their dwelling and the symbol of the new order. Yet the victory over the Titans did not mark the end of struggle. Every step towards the firm establishment of Zeus's reign was shadowed by new dangers and trials. When the Titans had been imprisoned, the blood of Uranus, spilled upon Gaia during his downfall, had given rise to a new generation of beings, the giants. They were immensely strong, born from the very substance of the earth, nourished by her power. Enraged that her Titan children had been banished to Tartarus, Gaia incited the giants to rise against the Olympians. Thus began the Gigantomachy, the war between gods and giants. The giants piled mountains upon mountains to reach the heavens, hurling boulders at the gods. Olympus trembled, and the earth groaned beneath their assault. The prophecies had long foretold that the giants could be defeated only with the aid of a mortal. Therefore, Zeus summoned the hero Heracles to his side. Together with the Olympians, Heracles fought and struck down the giants one by one, until the last of them fell, smote by the thunderbolts of Zeus and the arrows of Heracles. Thus, the power of Zeus was made even more secure. But Gaia would not rest. From the depths of the earth, she brought forth a creature far more terrible than the giants, Typhon. He towered above all mountains, his body coiled with serpents, his vast wings darkening the sky. Fire blazed from his eyes, flames burst from his mouth, and his voice was a sound of horror. Even the gods, when they saw him, were seized with terror. They fled to Egypt and took the forms of beasts, giving rise to ancient tales in which the gods were depicted as animals. Only Zeus stood firm. Grasping his thunderbolts, he faced the monster in battle. Earth and sky quaked as thunder met Typhon's roar. Their clash shook the cosmos. At last, Zeus struck down the monster and hurled him beneath Mount Etna on the Isle of Sicily. From that time forth, the Greeks said, the fire of the volcano was the breath of the imprisoned Typhon. After these victories, Zeus became not merely the king of gods, but the guarantor of cosmic order. He established the laws to which both gods and mortals were bound. Together with Themis, the goddess of justice, he ordained the paths of destiny, gave fate her balance scales, and set the Moirai, the fates, over all things, whose word stood higher even than the will of Zeus himself. When the new order was established at the summit of the world, Olympus, the lofty mountain rising into the clouds, became the dwelling place of the gods, the realm of eternal light and harmony. Here the immortals raised their palace of gleaming marble and gold, and from that moment Olympus became the very center of the cosmos. Zeus, the conqueror and wielder of the thunderbolt, sat upon his throne in a golden hall where the council of the gods would gather. He became the supreme ruler, not only because he commanded the power of lightning, but because he possessed the wisdom to administer justice, to punish and to show mercy, to give life and to take it away. His word was law among gods and men alike. Beside him sat his sister and consort, Hera, queen of Olympus. Her authority extended over marriage and the family, and she zealously guarded the sanctity of the bond between husband and wife. Their sister Demeter held dominion over the fertility of the earth, while Hestia became the gentle guardian of the hearth and home. Poseidon, brother of Zeus, ruled over the seas and oceans. With his trident, he could raise tempests and calm the waves, and in the deep, he reigned from his palace of coral and pearl. Hades, the dark and unseen one, governed the underworld, the shadowy realm of the departed. His power was inevitable and eternal, but Olympus was not only the dwelling of the elder gods. Here arose new divine powers, the children of Zeus and the other Olympians. Athena, born from the head of Zeus, clad in shining armor, became the goddess of wisdom and righteous war. Apollo, radiant and golden-haired, ruled over light, music, and prophecy, while his twin sister Artemis became goddess of the hunt and of the moon. Aphrodite, who had emerged from the foam of the sea, brought with her love and desire, from whose enchantment no being could escape. Hephaestus, the divine smith and craftsman, forged weapons and armor even for the gods themselves. Hermes, the swift messenger, traversed the worlds, linking gods and mortals alike. Each deity received a domain and a power so that order might endure and the world would never again descend into chaos. The Olympians gathered at their banquet table, feasting upon ambrosia and nectar, and there they spoke of the fates of gods and men. Decisions were made in council, presided over by Zeus, and none dared to defy the order thus ordained. Yet even among the gods, those immortal beings of infinite power, there was no peace. Jealousy, pride, desire, and cunning continually stirred conflict, turning Olympus into a realm of intrigue and hidden strife. The chief source of turmoil was Hera, the wife of Zeus. She was not only the queen of the gods, but a woman of great beauty and might, guardian of the sacred fire of marriage. Yet Zeus often betrayed their union, falling in love with goddesses and mortals alike, and Hera's heart burned with jealousy. She could not endure infidelity, and every affair of her husband became the cause of vengeance. Hera wove traps for Zeus's lovers, punishing them and the children born of his betrayals, seeking to prove her own dominion and to show that even the Lord of Thunder was not beyond her wrath. More than once, Hera plotted against Zeus himself. Together with Poseidon and Athena, she once conspired to overthrow the king of gods. While Zeus slept, the three powerful deities bound him in chains, tying his hands and feet so that he could not wield the lightning. They believed that, once deprived of his power, they could divide the world among themselves. But Zeus was not so easily undone. He called upon his loyal allies, and seizing the right moment, broke free, unleashing a storm of fury upon the traitors. Athena, though part of the plot, remained true to the Olympian order, while Poseidon and Hera were forced to submit. The quarrel left a deep scar upon Olympus. No god ever again dared to openly challenge the thunder, but secret intrigues never ceased. Conflicts often flared among the goddesses themselves. Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty, frequently clashed with Artemis, the chaste huntress and goddess of the moon. Aphrodite embodied passion, desire, and temptation. Her charms could ensnare even the immortals. Artemis, in contrast, cherished purity and independence, rejecting the seductions and follies of love. Their disputes arose whenever Aphrodite sought to enchant young men, or even young gods, whom Artemis protected. Their quarrels were not of words, but of deeds. Aphrodite would confuse and seduce, while Artemis would punish and restore order in her realm, often transforming the transgressors into beasts or stripping them of their strength. Discord also arose from Aphrodite's own infidelities. Her husband, Hephaestus, the lame craftsman of Olympus, often suffered from her affairs, especially her passion for Ares, the god of war. Once, unwilling to confront them openly, Hephaestus forged a cunning, invisible net, capable of ensnaring any who touched it. He laid it upon their bed, and when Aphrodite and Ares, consumed by desire, met in secret, the net closed around them, trapping them in their shame. Hephaestus called all the gods to witness, and laughter, scorn, and mockery echoed through the shining halls of Olympus. Nor was rivalry absent among other gods. Athena and Poseidon quarreled endlessly, even without mortal cause. Each sought to prove superiority. Athena upheld wisdom and strategy, showing that reason was mightier than brute strength, while Poseidon displayed the wild power of the seas, storms, and earthquakes, declaring that nature's force yielded to none. Their disputes often became contests of might, shaking Olympus itself, yet they never descended into lasting enmity, for the balance of the divine order had to be preserved. Even those not bound by war or love took part in intrigue. Hermes, the messenger and trickster, delighted in playing with circumstance, spreading rumors, aiding some in secret while ensnaring others. He could turn a petty quarrel into a grand scandal, weaving laughter and chaos into the golden peace of Olympus. Thus, despite its radiance and order, Olympus was never a place of calm. Passions burned there, jealousy, cunning, lust, and wrath mingled with wisdom, power, and justice. Not even immortals could escape their natures. The quarrels of Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Athena, Aphrodite, and Artemis created a constant tension that sometimes flared into open strife and at other times sank into silent schemes and secret vengeance. In these eternal conflicts, the very life of Olympus was born. For even in divine harmony, there pulsed the energy of passion and struggle, giving the realm of the gods its eternal, living fire. Meanwhile, a new struggle awaited Zeus, not against monsters, but against humankind. When Zeus became the ruler of heaven and the universe, the earth with all its mountains, rivers, and forests belonged to all in common. The Olympians dwelt upon the shining summit of Olympus, among clouds and eternal light, their lives flowing in triumph and splendor. Yet on the earth below, there were no beings to honor them, no creatures who could think and feel, no humans. Then the gods conceived the idea of creating mortals. Each contributed something of their own nature. One gave strength, another form, another the breath of life. But among them all stood out Prometheus, the Titan, son of Iapetus. He loved humankind more deeply than any other, and cared for them as a father for his children. It was he who molded the first humans from clay and water, and Athena breathed into them a living soul. Thus, the first mortals came into being. But they were weak and helpless, in need of guidance and protection. Prometheus taught them the crafts, how to build houses, gather food, and tame animals. Yet one thing they lacked above all, the gift of fire. Without it, they shivered in the cold, ate raw meat, and lived in darkness. Zeus, jealously guarding the divine power of Olympus, forbade any god to give fire to mortals. He desired that men remain weak and dependent upon the gods. Prometheus, loving humanity more than the ruler of the heavens, resolved upon a daring deed. He ascended Olympus in secret, stole the sacred fire, concealed it within the hollow stem of a reed, and brought it down to mankind. From that moment, humans learned to cook food, harden clay, forge weapons, and build cities. Fire made them akin to the gods, and Zeus's heart blazed with wrath. To punish Prometheus, Zeus devised a cruel vengeance. The Titan was bound in unbreakable iron chains and fastened to a cliff in wild Scythia. There he was condemned to eternal torment. Each day an eagle, the bird of Zeus, flew to him and tore at his liver. Yet since Prometheus was immortal, the wound healed overnight, and with the dawn, the agony began anew. Thus, the Titan, the friend of humankind, endured endless suffering for his gift of love. But Zeus's anger did not fall upon Prometheus alone. He chose also to punish humankind, who had accepted the stolen fire. He commanded Hephaestus, the divine smith, to fashion from clay a woman of surpassing beauty. Athena clothed her in shining garments and placed a radiant crown upon her head. The goddesses bestowed upon her gifts of grace and allure, and Hermes filled her heart with cunning and deceitful words. They named her Pandora, meaning the all-gifted. Zeus sent her down among men, and with her she carried a sealed jar. Enchanted by her beauty, humans welcomed her into their dwelling. But when the lid of the jar was lifted, sickness, sorrow, hunger, and suffering all the evils that had never before touched the race of men. From that day onward, pain and death became the companions of human life. Only one thing remained in the jar when it was closed again: hope. Thus began the story of mankind, born from the gift of fire, which brought power and knowledge, and burdened by the wrath of the gods, which brought disease and death. And Prometheus still endured his torment for the love of mortals, until, many ages later, the great hero Heracles came and shattered his chains. After mankind had received the gift of fire from Prometheus, along with the powers of craft and wisdom, they began to live more freely and independently. Yet together with these divine gifts entered pride and audacity. With each passing generation, humans grew harder of heart. They ceased to honor the gods, forgot sacrifice and justice, and the world filled with wickedness and deceit. When Zeus beheld this corruption, his wrath flared like lightning. He judged that humankind had become too depraved and must be destroyed, so that a new race, purer and more obedient, might take its place upon the earth. The Lord of Thunder summoned the council of the Olympians, and all the gods agreed with his decree. It was decided that a great deluge should fall upon the world, a flood that would wash away every living thing. But before this doom descended, two mortals learned of the divine decision. They were Deucalion, the son of the wise Titan Prometheus, and his wife Hera, daughter of the Titan Prometheus and Pandora. Prometheus, foreseeing the coming ruin, warned his son and counseled him to build a great ark. Deucalion obeyed his father. He constructed a vessel of sturdy timber, sealed with pitch, so that neither rain nor tempest could break it apart. Then Zeus opened the heavens, and torrents poured down without ceasing. Rivers burst their banks, seas rose over the lands, and the fields and cities were swallowed by the deep. All living things perished, men, beasts, and birds alike, and the whole earth lay beneath the waters. Only Deucalion and Hera survived, drifting upon their ark for 9 days and 9 nights over the endless flood. At last, the waters began to subside, and their vessel came to rest upon the peaks of Mount Parnassus. When the couple stepped forth from the boat, they beheld a silent and empty world. The land lay bare and lifeless, and they alone remained of the entire race of humankind. In sorrow and reverence, they prayed to Themis, goddess of divine law, asking how they might restore mankind and people the earth anew. Themis answered them with a riddle: "Veil your heads, loosen your garments, and cast behind you the bones of your great mother." At first, Deucalion and Hera were stricken with dread, for the bones of the great mother could mean only the bones of Gaia, the earth herself. But soon, understanding dawned. The bones of the earth were stones. So Deucalion began to cast stones over his shoulder, and every stone that touched the ground took the shape of a man. Hera did likewise, and her stones became women. Thus a new race of mortals arose, stronger and more enduring than the first, for they were born of stone. From that time forth, humankind began anew. They remembered to honor the gods and offer sacrifices, and the world once again was filled with life. Thus, after the flood, the earth revived, and the race of men continued its eternal story. For a time, the world seemed to live in perfect harmony. The gods ruled from their shining thrones upon Olympus, and men worshipped them with reverence, offering sacrifices, keeping their laws, and heeding the counsel of the wise immortals. Justice reigned upon the earth, the harvests were plentiful, and sickness and war were rare. Mortals lived in accord with the gods, and their hearts were filled with gratitude and awe. But in the realm of the deathless, discord never truly slept. As the ages passed, strife began to stir upon Olympus itself. Zeus, lord of thunder, grew careless of his vows. His passions led him to mortal and divine alike. Hera, ever watchful and proud, wove her intrigues in secret. Aphrodite and Artemis quarreled over love and purity. Athena and Poseidon contended for wisdom and dominion. Every divine quarrel echoed upon the earth. Storms and blights, fevers and quarrels among men arose, where once peace had dwelt. Mortals began to see that the gods were no longer of one will, that even mighty Zeus could not fully command the world. Doubt took root in the hearts of men. In time, mankind began to draw away from their divine patrons. Sacrifices grew fewer, temples stood empty. People started to believe that fortune and power came not from heavenly favor, but from their own hands, skill and cunning. The first cities were raised not only in honor of the gods, but for protection from storms, floods, and quakes that once were feared as signs of Olympus's wrath. Men turned their minds to craft and learning, seeking truth through reason rather than revelation. Even the gift of fire, once stolen from the heavens by Prometheus, came to symbolize human freedom. With it, they baked their bread, fired their clay, forged their metal, and built their homes. No longer did they tremble lest Zeus snatch the flame away or strike them down for their daring. With each generation, mankind grew more self-reliant, and the bond between mortal and God grew fainter. The Olympians felt this distance keenly. Zeus's wrath fell upon the earth in storms, plagues, and wars, but his punishments no longer humbled men. Mortals saw the quarrels of the gods and began to understand that the rule of Olympus was not absolute. Thus ended the golden age of Olympus. The world that had once bowed before the will of the immortals now began to walk its own path. Men no longer trembled before Zeus's thunder or longed for Aphrodite's enchantments. The glory of Olympus remained in the marble and the gold of its palaces, in the eternal radiance of the heavens. But its dominion over the living world was fading, and though the gods were still immortal and mighty, their bond with mankind had begun to crumble. The age of perfect harmony was drawing to a close, and a new era was dawning. An age when mortals would live not only under the gaze of the gods, but by their own laws, with their own wisdom, their own passions, and their own defiance. Thank you for watching this video until the end. If you enjoyed it, please support the channel. Give it a like and subscribe so you don't miss new videos.